On an isolated farm, a woman named Annie desperately searches for her daughter, Emily. Armed with a shotgun, she searches the house while the girl tries to hide from an unknown threat. During the escape, Emily ends up injuring herself and finds shelter in an elevator. Shortly after, Annie finds traces of her daughter's blood, but is surprised when a door opens behind her. Frightened, she fires several times, but finds no one. Emily hears the shots and remains hidden until she is found by her mother. However, during the reunion, Annie notices someone approaching and fires again, hitting Paul, her ex-husband. Then she turns in Emily's direction and fires once more. Later, the police arrive at the property and arrest Annie for her daughter's disappearance and for shooting her ex-husband. From that moment on, the film begins to alternate between past and present, gradually revealing the events of the film. Then the story returns to the past, when Annie moves to an old property with her daughter. Annie hopes to rebuild her life after a troubled divorce. During the move, she tries to comfort the girl and promises that this will be a new beginning for both of them. Emily shows concern about her parents' separation and asks about her father. Annie explains that he will not live with them, but will continue to be present in her life. Later, while getting to know her new room, Emily observes the vast cornfield surrounding the property. However, a sudden noise behind her catches her attention. Curious, Emily decides to check what caused the noise and goes to her grandmother's old room. However, when she gets there, she finds no one and returns to her own room. Later, during the early morning, Annie is awakened by the sound of footsteps echoing through the house. Not understanding what is happening, she goes out to investigate and notices that the door is open. After closing them, a noise coming from the elevator catches her attention. As she approaches, Annie shines a light under the crack beneath the door and sees something move on the other side. Frightened, she immediately steps back. At that moment, the doors open again on their own. Annie runs to close them, but before she can, the elevator door opens. Back in the present, Annie is interrogated by Sheriff Dick. Angry, she questions why no one is searching for Emily. However, the officer reminds her that Annie is the main suspect in the case. Furious, Annie insists she would never harm her own daughter. Dick then counters, saying that Paul also believed that, until he was shot by her. Sometime later, Paul decides to stop by the property to see his daughter. The unexpected arrival of her ex-husband does not please Annie, who clearly still holds resentment from the separation. Despite this, she eventually gives in when she sees how happy Emily is to see him again. While they talk, Paul shows curiosity about his ex-wife's new life in that place. Annie tries to show confidence in the change and states that she is determined to move forward. However, the conversation soon reveals that her situation is still far from resolved. Shortly before leaving, Paul finds an opportunity to talk alone with Annie. Trying to get close again, he apologizes for past mistakes and shows regret for the end of the relationship. However, Annie is not willing to forget what happened. She recalls that she was betrayed precisely during one of the most difficult moments of her life, while caring for her sick mother. Paul tries to explain his actions, but Annie makes it clear that she does not want to resume that discussion. Determined to move forward, she states that she can take care of herself and Emily. Without insisting further, Paul says goodbye and leaves. Later, Annie decides to spend time with Emily, and the two go out to play in the cornfield surrounding the property. While running among the crops, Annie ends up losing sight of her daughter. At that moment, an intense light appears in front of her. Believing it to be Emily, Annie asks her daughter to stop playing and turn off the light. To her surprise, the glow disappears. However, seconds later, new lights appear in front of her. Realizing that something is wrong, Annie panics and begins searching for Emily. Upon returning near the house, she finally spots her daughter on the roof of the residence. Not understanding how the girl got there, before we discover what happened, the scene cuts to the next day. Concerned about the events of the previous night, Annie decides to seek out Sheriff Dick and reports everything that happened on the property. However, the officer believes that the lights seen in the cornfield are nothing more than a prank. Annie tries to convince her that something more serious is happening and mentions the fact that Emily mysteriously appeared on the roof of the house. Without giving much credit to the story, Dick talks to the girl and asks if she remembers what happened that night. However, Emily cannot explain how she got there. Without finding anything that justifies an investigation, the sheriff ends the visit and leaves. Later, Annie watches the cornfield while trying to understand the events of the previous night. Despite reassuring Emily, she remains concerned about the strange scratches found on the property. In search of answers, Annie researches the mysterious lights seen on the property. She finds a website that raises the possibility of a child being pursued. The content belongs to Walter Sims, a man obsessed with theories about invisible beings. In one of the videos, he claims to believe in the existence of unknown entities. He encourages other people to report similar experiences. During the research, the lights reappear outside the house, causing Annie to run to look for Emily. Meanwhile, the girl notices the strange movement and questions what is happening. Frightened by the events, Annie tells Emily to stay in the bedroom and goes downstairs to investigate. While watching the cornfield through the door, she is surprised when the elevator door opens by itself. Then Emily appears and is sent back to the bedroom. Determined to understand what is happening, Annie goes out armed toward the lights in the field. As she approaches, the lights suddenly go out, leaving the place in complete darkness. She continues advancing through the cornfield, but finds nothing. Upon noticing something strange inside the house, she runs back and asks Emily to open the door. The girl obeys and questions what happened. After the episode in the cornfield, Annie asks Emily if there was anyone else with her, but the girl denies it. Frightened, she hugs her daughter, who does not understand the situation. The next morning, Sheriff Dick returns to the property to hear the account again. Annie claims to have seen something approaching Emily in the house, but the explanation does not fully convince the officer. Even so, Dick says she believes her and guarantees that she will maintain the family's safety. Even so, Annie shows insecurity inside her own house. The sheriff tries to reassure her, promises to investigate the case, and leaves. On her way out, she meets Paul and advises him to talk to Annie. Inside the house, Paul tries to understand Annie's behavior after the strange events. She reports unusual signs in the residence and the feeling of being watched, but he tries to rationalize everything and suggests normal explanations. The conversation becomes tense when he mentions the possibility of panic attacks, which irritates Annie. Before the discussion advances, Emily appears with a bleeding nose, leaving everyone in shock. Before leaving, Paul shows concern about how Annie has been taking care of Emily, suggesting that his daughter should not stay with her, which leaves her shaken. Later, Annie installs a monitor in the girl's bedroom to watch during the night. At dawn, sounds coming from the cornfield frighten her, and when checking the camera, she realizes that Emily is not in bed. Desperate, she finds her daughter at the bedroom door, and Emily asks to sleep with her. Shortly after, new noises are heard in the house, and Annie goes out to investigate. After finding nothing, Annie goes to the bathroom and, while washing her face, the lights begin to flicker. Then she notices a strange movement, something moving toward Emily's bedroom. She runs there, but finds the door closed. Soon after, Emily's bedroom door closes by itself, and upon entering, Annie does not find her daughter. In despair, she searches the entire house without success and calls Sheriff Dick. On the way, the officer finds Emily alone on the road and puts her in the car. During the trip, the girl says she does not want to return to the house, which makes Dick even more suspicious. Even so, she takes her back to the property. Upon arriving, Annie hugs her daughter, but the sheriff remains suspicious about what happened and states that she will report the case to social services. Annie reacts by denying any irregularity and insists that she did nothing to her daughter. Irritated by the accusations, she asks to go inside, saying she needs to take care of her daughter. In the present, Annie continues being interrogated by Sheriff Dick, who questions the presence of weapons on the property. She states that they are for her safety, but the officer insists on knowing about the rest of the arsenal and what she was shooting at that night. At that moment, the scene returns in flashback, showing that the shot was fired at a non-human creature that appeared behind Emily. Annie hits the being, but it grabs the girl and flees through the elevator that leads to the basement. In despair, she tries to reach them, but finds only her daughter's toy. Back in the present, Annie claims that something took Emily and that she is still in the house. Determined to save her, Annie says she will return to get her, but Dick does not believe her and considers her story absurd. She orders Annie to be taken into custody for transfer to prison. Before being taken away, Annie states that the officer is wasting time, while Dick insists that the girl is dead and asks her to stop with the allegations. During transport, a cow appears on the road, frightening the driver. The driver loses control of the vehicle, which falls from a bridge. Everyone dies in the accident, except Annie, who survives and manages to free herself from the handcuffs to escape. The next morning, an officer confirms the deaths to Dick. Even so, Dick refuses to believe that Annie is dead and orders the searches to continue. Even injured, Annie manages to return to the property. She enters through the basement area and takes shelter in the house, where she changes clothes and retrieves the hidden weapons. Prepared to continue the search, she begins to hear sounds coming from Emily's bedroom, but upon investigating finds nothing. With no answers, she decides to remain alert, watching the elevator entrance during the night. Later, new noises coming from her daughter's bedroom make her run to the place. A chest draws her attention as it moves by itself. A noise distracts her for a moment, and when she looks back, the chest is open, revealing a large hole in the floor. As she approaches, Annie tries to observe the interior, but is surprised by a hand that grabs her. Then she awakens, realizing that it was all just a dream. With no alternatives, Annie seeks out Walter Sims in search of answers. Initially, he treats her with distrust and tries to push her away, but changes his attitude when she states that her daughter was taken by something she cannot explain. Allowing her to enter, Walter reveals an environment full of notes and studies about phenomena and supposed non-human entities. He says he has already been following the case and shows interest in what happened. When Annie questions how he knows this, he answers vaguely, stating only that he saw information circulating online. Walter warns that, if that is real, the situation is more dangerous than it seems, suggesting that these entities may already be aware of her. Annie, however, insists that she only wants to find her daughter. When questioned about what she saw, she describes the presence in the dark and mentions a strange glow in the creature's eyes. Walter then associates the account with what he calls black lights. He shows a sketch, asking if it matches what she encountered. While Walter explains, Annie begins to feel ill and has a nosebleed, even fainting while looking at the drawing presented by him. The scene then changes to a vision of Emily inside an unknown cave, where an alien creature approaches her. The moment she opens her eyes, Annie awakens, realizing that it was all just a dream. Walter goes on to detail what he believes to be the origin of the creature, describing it as a humanoid species considered extinct, responsible for kidnapping children and feeding on vital energy. He reinforces the dimension of the problem by citing the number of disappearances that occur every year. In shock, Annie asks how she can defeat it and save her daughter. Walter responds that he first needs to confirm the situation personally, and insists that she needs to see something with her own eyes. Walter takes Annie to an isolated room and apologizes for her and her daughter, then locks the door. Inside, Annie tries to convince him to let her out, in despair. Walter, however, states that he cannot allow her to destroy them, explaining that he has spent his entire life searching for those creatures. He says that now he finally has proof to show the world and that everyone will know the truth. Annie becomes desperate and tries to open the room in any way possible, while Walter leaves the place. She begins to explore the room and finds a large mural covered with clippings and news about children's disappearances, leaving her completely terrified. Meanwhile, Walter returns to Annie's property and soon feels that something is out of the ordinary. Upon noticing strange lights coming from the cornfield, he decides to investigate, but quickly changes his mind and locks himself inside the house. Shortly after, a strong light takes over the place and a creature appears behind him, attacking him and causing an injury to his face. In panic, Walter runs to the vehicle and tries to escape, but during the escape he realizes that the creature is inside the car. He loses control of the automobile and goes off the road, managing to survive and escape the attack. Walter manages to reach an old railway and runs into an abandoned wagon in search of shelter. Soon after, new lights appear at the place, forcing him to hide and remain still so as not to be seen. Even so, a creature is already nearby and begins to track him, leaving him completely paralyzed by fear. When the silence returns, Walter tries to leave the hiding place and flee, but ends up being surprised. He is reached by a creature and attacked in a brutal way, enveloped in an intense light, resulting in his death. Later, the sheriff arrives at the place with her police team. Upon asking what was found, one of the officers states that he has never seen anything like it. As she approaches the body, she discovers that it is Walter, killed violently. Surprised, she questions his identity, and the officer explains that he was known for conspiracy theories, and that he was precisely the man Annie had been researching on the computer. Meanwhile, Annie still tries to escape from the room where she is trapped when she notices sirens in the distance. She realizes that the sheriff is nearby and becomes increasingly worried. The police team tries to enter the property but finds everything locked. With no alternative, they decide to force entry. As they search the place, they consider the material left there as evidence of obsession and unfounded theories. During the inspection, Sheriff Dick finds tissues with blood stains, which increases her suspicion about what happened in the house. Shortly after, a noise draws the group's attention, and part of the team goes to check. Dick follows alone to one of the rooms where she believes Annie may be hiding. Inside the environment, Annie remains motionless, with her nose still bleeding, trying not to be discovered. The sheriff notices the trail of blood on the floor and approaches, almost finding her. At that moment, one of the officers interrupts her and calls her attention to another discovery. He shows images from a security camera in which Annie appears with Walter, revealing the connection between the two. Taking advantage of the police's distraction, Annie manages to escape and returns to the property. Upon realizing that Paul is still at the place, she hides and waits until he moves away. Meanwhile, Paul moves away and goes in search of his daughter's body. The elevator door opens mysteriously, and he ends up being taken to the underground, where he becomes trapped and is attacked by a creature. During the search for Paul, Annie ends up going down to the basement and faces a creature. She reacts quickly, shoots, and manages to escape back to the surface. Annie gathers courage to return to the basement, but Dick appears suddenly. However, a monster appears and she is quickly attacked. Having her vital energy drained, the monster then advances against Annie, but she manages to defend herself with light, realizing that this can hurt it. She goes down to the underground and finds the entrance to a cave, where she begins the search for her daughter. Inside, she finds holes in the ground and without vital energy. Then she locates Paul unconscious and helps him wake up. Shortly after, the two find Emily being attacked by the creature. Paul hands the car key to Annie and asks her to rescue the daughter, apologizing for not having believed her. He lures the monster away, while Annie manages to save Emily. Paul is killed by the creature, but Annie escapes with her daughter. Back at the house, she spreads gasoline around the place to destroy the monster. While spreading gasoline around the place, she is surprised by the creature and needs to fight to escape. After managing to get away from the monster, she sets fire to the residence in an attempt to destroy the creature once and for all. The two escape by car, while the property burns. The film ends revealing that not all monsters were destroyed.